Architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is Human Settlements Planning. The topic we'll be delving into is issues in contemporary urban planning in India. The topics we'll be looking into are self-sustained communities, SEZ. Self-sustained communities that have to be constructed, there's a particular project structure they have to undergo. How do you go about building a self-sustained community? Number one, you need to have a developer or an owner, one landowner with other homeowners, land owned that collectively, leasing land if you're leasing it from the government or a private person, land held in trust. So basically in a community, one person does not own the land and it is usually not transferable from father to son sort of a thing, which usually happens. Because in a community, they are either by an ideology or living by a particular whatever sustainable religious belief or whatever is it that they have. So those have to match. So all of this means that the land is held in trust and you are not, one person is not free to go about selling or buying. All these options have pros and cons. They must have support from town political structure as well as financial institutions. Resource use, air supply as one of our most important resources. A location must be chosen with clean air in mind. You usually cannot fix this on a neighborhood or community level if that's going to be a problem. Water supply, there should be enough for the planned community. Quality should be uncontaminated and water must be readily available. Flood control, some system to manage water flow and drainage through the community. That is, the site should have a natural slope such that water does not stagnate within that community. Possible solutions to water issues if you have, if supply, like not all sites it's possible. Install cisterns for rainwater collection. Use water conservation methods, use dual piping methods to utilize grey water, that is water from a sewage treatment plant when feasible. Plant drought tolerant plants rather than lawns. Quality, use no chemicals or fertilizers, use integrated pest management, choose a location far from an industry or conventional agriculture, and you need to develop artificial wetlands. And for flood control, reduce the amount of area that's going to be impervious, that is pavement area, develop artificial wetlands and install a natural drainage system. For food supply and quality, this is achieved through decentralized organic food production. You need to utilize a diversity of plants. Small household gardens are the most ecologically sound. Food processing can be done efficiently in communities. Buy from local producers. Enough land must be designated for agriculture to support the food needs of the community at a sustainable level, whether it's in large areas or small plots. So usually what happens with food supply is, sometimes if it is in initial stages when the community is being built, it is difficult to anticipate what is going to be the requirement of food that is going to be supplied. And number two, because of certain weather changes or calamities, like an excessive rainfall, or it could be a flood, or it could be drought, whatever the reason, there could be some reason the plants may die or may not be able to produce that quality or quantity of food. So they should always have a sustained backup plan. Even though they call themselves as a sustainable community, they have to make sure that they are getting all the required nutrition that the human body requires. Shelter, this is needed for protection from weather as well as to enhance the sense of security. This can be done providing a mix of housing types, large, small, rental as well as own. Develop ways to be inclusive, labor as down payment and build your own. When you say inclusive, it means let's not have only the upper echelon of society or middle class people or upper middle class people, because once you enter the community, all of you are going to work in that community to live a sustainable life. So, if a poorer person does want to join but does not have the investment, he could come down and put labor as a down payment. He would help in the construction of the houses or in the help in the gardening or in the agricultural part of it. Creative financing is often necessary, which has to be supported by rural development banks or small local banks, and green designs or sustainable design of structures wherever possible. There is no point if you live in a sustainable community and then you have a house built of concrete which is chugging a lot of energy because of need of air conditioners or things like that. Moving on to energy, conserve whenever possible. Use alternate sources such as solar, which could be passive or active, wind, biomass or small scale hydroelectric, geothermal or fuel cells. Structure for low energy usage, which is most important. Make pedestrian and bicycle traffic convenient. Minimize automobile use. Locate near public transportation or incorporate into your plan. Locate near services and schools or incorporate even those into your plan. So, when all of this happens, if within the community only pedestrian or cycles are going to be allowed, that is going to completely reduce fuel consumption. There could be just one or two vehicles which is going to go from outside to inside, which is going to be transporting goods and other related activities. Other resources, incorporate into your plan mechanisms to reduce resource use, reduce, reuse and recycle. Now, if you look at the aesthetics of it, in order to be sustainable, a community must be pleasing for residents who live there. Recreational facilities should be provided for the enjoyment of members, and gathering places or social places are essential. Citizen participation, community members must feel like their voice is being heard. They should feel like their input is required or they are able to contribute directly in some fashion. If they feel redundant or if they feel underutilized or underappreciated, then the whole concept of a community is lost. Some system for consensus building must be utilized. Moving on to a special economic zone or SEZ. What is an SEZ? The concept of an SEZ is expected to bring large dividends to the state in terms of economic and industrial development and the generation of new employment opportunities. The SEZs are expected to be engines for economic growth. Special economic zone is defined as a specifically delineated duty-free enclave and should be deemed to be foreign territory for the purposes of trade operations, duties and tariffs. If you look at a brief review of what it is, it covers a broad range of more specific zones: free trade zones, export processing zones, free zones, industrial estates, free ports, urban enterprises zones and others. So, the reason why an SEZ is usually developed in a state is for it to be a magnet for that state to develop. This will attract people from across the country and even across the globe to come and set up shop here or industries here. Come here, we will give you these following incentives. Build your industry here, build your office here, these are the incentives you will get. You will not have to pay taxes, this will be duty free. So, by giving certain incentives, you are ensuring that industries are coming into your state. And what are the main advantages for this happening? You are ensuring a lot of employment opportunities, you are ensuring a steady growth of the state. So, that is the main purpose of an SEZ. If you look at the history of free trade zones, the first free trade zone in the world has started on 1st January 1965 at Kandla in Kutch, which is in Gujarat, India. By 1978, India had 4 other free trade zones at Mumbai, Chennai, Noida and Falta. In 1978, China has gone through similar major economic makeover and they also realized in the concept of free trade zones. First Chinese free trade zone became operational in 1984, the Shenzhen. In year 2000, one zone of Shenzhen was exporting thrice of India. As of today, there are about 2,000 operations of free trade zones spread over 150 countries across the world. So, what are the different kinds of SEZs? They can be categorized on basis of sector, function or location, and they are required to have processing as well as non-processing areas. So, you have the sector specific SEZ, multi-product SEZ and an SEZ in a port or an airport. The fundamentals of SEZs are, they are different from traditionally free zones. They are larger in size, they offer broader range of activities such as single window management, streamlined procedures, duty free privileges and also access to domestic market on a duty paid basis. Whether the enclave is termed EPZ, FTZ or SEZ, the cardinal factors remain the same. That is, you need to have appropriate infrastructure and transport facilities, low factor cost, flexible labor laws, convertibility of currency which enables in global trade, stable legal and administrative regime. Your state should not have political unrest situation which will be the major deterrent for global people to come and invest in that state. A commitment to the canons of an open economy. What are the objectives of an SEZ Act? Generation of additional economic activity, promotion of exports of goods and services, promotion of investment from domestic and foreign sources, creation of employment opportunities, development of infrastructure facilities. What is the role of SEZ in the Indian economy? To provide internationally competitive environment, to encourage FDI and enhance the GDP, to increase share in global exports. SEZ exports accounting for 26% of India's total export in 2011. The salient features of an SEZ: self-certification for export and import. Import and export movements of goods are based on self-declaration. No routine examination is made unless specific order is being issued from Development Commissioner or any other such authorities. Subcontracting: a SEZ unit may subcontract a part of its product or production process to different units even abroad. So, those eligibilities of the SEZ will continue even to that area, even though it officially does not fall under this particular geographic location of this SEZ. Fiscal incentives with respect to tax, exemption from excise and customer duty on procurement of capital assets, consumable stores, raw materials from the domestic market, exemption from sales tax, import duty, income tax, minimum alternative tax and dividend distribution tax. Single window clearance, that is, submit regularity documents at single locations, less proceedings and it saves time. Some of the most important SEZs in our country: Karnataka, you have the Biotechnology and Information Technology Services. SEZ on biotechnology sector in Bangalore's Electronic City. This covers an area of about 43 acres. Then you have Sri Renuka Sugars Limited, SEZ on sugarcane processing complex. This covers around 100 hectares comprising a sugar plant, power station, distillery at Burlati in the Belgaum district. Itina Properties Private Limited and 3 others SEZs in the IT sector which covers electronics, hardware and software sectors in Bangalore over an area of 15.732 hectares. You have Wipro Infotech SEZ on IT at Electronic City in Sarajpur, Bangalore, and Hewlett Packard India Software Operation Private Limited, which is the SEZ on IT again. Food processing and related SEZ services in Hassan over an area of about 157.91 hectares, SEZs on pharmaceuticals, biotechnology and chemical sectors in Hassan, which covers around 282 hectares. You have Seeps in Andheri, East Mumbai. Then you have Khopata and multi-product again in Mumbai. Navi Mumbai again multi-products. Salt Lake Electronic City in West Bengal. Manikanchan Gems and Jewelry, West Bengal. And Calcutta Leather Complex in West Bengal. And you have the Falta Food Processing Unit again in West Bengal. So, what is the main purpose of having all of these SEZs is, when you look at it in these different cities, it obviously changes the dynamic of that particular city and the urbanization model of that city. You have an entire area which is completely secluded from the rest of the city. It has its own infrastructure, it has its own power station like you saw in some cases. It has its own, based on these SEZs that come about in this area, a lot of developers build large gated communities in and around that area. In our own city of Chennai, you have an SEZ right on Tambram, and then you have so many other such IT based SEZs in Oragadam, and then even on the old Mahabalipuram road, where you want companies to come and open shop there and ensure that you can offer a lot of people a lot of employment opportunities. You have a processing area and a non-processing area, and the entities you have the developer, co-developer, and finally the SEZ unit. An SEZ unit needs the support of the government, but it's primarily a private sector development. You can see that exports from SEZ has grown 15% in 2011 and 2012. So, there is obviously a huge advantage of having them within our urban frame. Growth and development, attracts foreign direct investment, exposure to technology and global market, increasing GDP and economic model, employment opportunities are created. So, when you look at all of these are pertaining not only to that particular state or that city, but at a national level as well. When we talk of GDP, it is only that's or the economic model, it's not only that state that it's going to get benefited. Overall, as a country, it is going to attract a lot of foreign investments. What happens on the other side of it is, land acquisition happens at very low prices. Farmers lose their livelihood because all of this, usually the areas you can see, they are talking about 200 hectares, so many 100 acres. So, when you are talking about areas in this size, obviously it is not going to happen within an urban area. It is going to happen either in the urban rural fringe or in a completely rural area. So, what happens is, good agricultural fertile land is lost for industrial purposes or in the service sector. Farmers lose their livelihood, and they lose, and the compensation they get for that land is literally peanuts compared to the value the government attests to it through these foreign investments. Tax holidays affect the GDP. The SEZ policy of 2000, new policy in April 2000, which says SEZs are permitted to be set up in public, private, joint sector or by the state governments. Minimum size of 1000 hectares, that is 4 square miles, simplified procedures and more incentives. The main measures you take up are: conditions for automatic approval relaxed considerably, customs procedures are simplified, units could produce items reserved for SSI units in domestic market, 100% FDI investment for manufacturing, profits could be repatriated fully, freedom for subcontracting, 100% IT exemption for 5 years, exemption from central excise duty on capital goods, raw materials, consumable spares from domestic market, reimbursement of CST paid on domestic purchases. The positive impacts to the entire country: world-class business environment, increased FDI, higher economic growth, infrastructural development, export growth, employment opportunities, exposure to technology and global markets. Positive impacts to business houses: hassle-free operating environment, single window clearance, simplified procedure for setting up businesses, compliance procedure with self-certification, duty-free imports, tax exemption, external commercial borrowings and 100% profit repatriation from export earnings. So, all of these incentives are to act as a honeypot for developers and investors to come and invest in that particular city and state, and which will not only enhance the urban fabric of those places, but will also attract people and developers to come in, real estate developers to come in, build in better houses, and simultaneously we have to ensure there is a service structure stipulation that the government provides, where the labor force has to be employed only from the local bodies. That cannot be outsourced, because we need to ensure that not only white collar jobs but even blue collar jobs are getting offed off. So that way, when offering of different job opportunities are there within the SEZ complex, it has to be different strata of society and just not the educated and the business people. To the people, employment opportunities, impact on lifestyle and standard of living, business infrastructure combined with social facilities, better work culture, good education and leadership vision. Now, with respect to the hurdles to the nation, obviously there is a loss of revenue, at least initially, because we have exempted all kinds of taxes. We initially want to attract the investors to come in and set up shop here. So, the initial phase, what we have to take as a loss of revenue can be also seen as an investment, but till we know we are going to get 100% returns, it is considered as loss of revenue. To the business, land acquisition, single window actually does not work in all places, no strategic planning for electricity and water. Similarly, the infrastructure should also develop simultaneously. You cannot have a developed SEZ with all kinds of top-notch companies there, and if you are going to have frequent power cuts, they are going to guzzle up diesel and fuel for the generators to run. It does not make any sense. To the people, grabbing of fertile land, scarcity of water, that is because of consumption or overconsumption, food scarcity, exploitation of labor and landless farmers. Farmers' land is taken away for a few thousand rupees, and that will not tide them over for even 1 year, and then once they lose their land, they are jobless without any other skill in hand. To the environment, mangrove destruction, destruction of groundwater recharge system as well as pollution. If you look at the SWOT analysis, the strength of the Indian SEZ, it is based on the Western model of, or the SEZ in China, an established legal redress system, relatively low labor costs, employment opportunities. India has a large English speaking and skilled workforce which can be put to use, exposure to technology in the global market, which means the people working here are made ready to such that they can even go abroad and work in an equal level. Worldwide acceptance of capabilities in the fields like pharmaceutical manufacturing, research, engineering design, hotels and hospitality, financial and other institutional networks like insurance companies. Weaknesses, if you look at it, it is poor infrastructure and transport facilities, high cost of capital, inadequate institutional support, political changes, inappropriate locations. Opportunities, an alternative manufacturing base, particularly compared to Chinese SEZs, investments in core strength areas like IT and software, new small ports and airports are also being developed keeping SEZs in mind, a large NRI base who have traditionally invested less in greenfield development in India. What are the threats? The pattern of buying and selling may not continue. With relocation of industries in other third world countries, new competitors will emerge. Opposing interests, prospect of even more restrictive labor laws being introduced, increasing rejection rate for proposals to establish SEZs. And one of the main causes of this is every state wants to get even its own city on its map. So they compete even amongst each other. Even though India is looking at foreign investors as an overall country, individual cities and states compete, and you might actually have opposing interests because of that. If you look at the flow chart of going about to set about an SEZ, it can be done in two ways: by applying to the SG or applying to the board of approval. Then the SG, you have the state government will forward the proposal to BOA and it obtains the concurrence from the state government, and then BOA approves that proposal. So, board of approval can go directly or through the state government. So, you have two options. So, depending, obviously the single window does not work all the time. Then from the central government, it has the approval letter going to the developer. Then the developer will furnish the required documents about that area back again to the central government, and then finally the central government will notify that area as a SEZ. The reasons for failure in our country is inadequate infrastructure, restrictive policies, lengthy procedures, no single window. It does not function the way we want it, because here you have a lot of red tape and paperwork involved, with officers at every level who needs to give approval. Locational disadvantages because of certain, like I told you, individual states compete with each other finally, and then because of certain reasons, if they do go to that particular state, they could have certain disadvantages because of language or because of infrastructural developments. Stringent labor laws. What are the different impacts of the special economic zone? Effluent of the industry will deteriorate physical condition of soil. The chemical effluents from the industry will affect the bioresources. The subsurface and underground water quality will be impaired because of heavy metals through the contaminated water from the surface. The fertile land will become unproductive for agriculture in the future. The environment will be affected by such pollution. Land value is decreased because fertility is lost. Socio-economic conditions of people in that area will be affected. Environmental Protection Act is inapplicable to the SEZs. No environmental clearance is needed. That becomes the main hole in the whole parcel. Because of this, a lot of beneficial things that could happen to the environment is ignored. What things like sustainable architecture or design could be introduced, all that needn't be done because of the Environment Protection Act not being applicable on an SEZ. Violates the Panchayat Raj Act for local self-government, violates laws granting rights and control to Adivasi communities all over the land, and it violates many international conventions on human rights. To conclude, SEZ policy has no doubt given a boost to our economy, but comparison of implementation with other countries brings out a lot of problems within our policy. The reason for disparity can be attributed to improper policying, irresponsible planning while locating the SEZs, ineffective land acquisition policies, and finally improper rehabilitation policy. So, the key challenges is we have to exercise certain amount of control while approving and locating SEZs. Initially, yes, we do want to attract a lot of foreign investments, but we do not want to compromise on things that later we are going to bear the brunt of, where the profit that we make from this has to be poured in back to that SEZ to develop it in the right way. It needs to be integrated with the existing master plans and regional plans. It needs to have a provision of employment for landless laborers. It needs to have a provision of revenue for urban labor groups on sharing basis to compensate their withdrawal once that area has been notified as an SEZ. And also there is a need to ensure that this will be treated as a sub-regional plan around that SEZ area. So, as an SEZ is developed in every state, we have to ensure that in the urge in a hurry to attract foreign investments, we shouldn't be cutting our own leg in the process. We have to ensure that common man, the environment, and especially even the Indian economy finally does not pay a huge price in the future date to make sure that SEZ to function well. So, we need to ensure that the SEZ is part of the master plan, has certain rules and regulations still permitting to it. The incentives with respect to the taxes and the economics of it can still continue, but with respect to consumption of resources, natural resources as well as fuel, everything, it has to be done within a set parameters by that industry government as well as the central government. At the end of this lecture, we have studied about self-sustained communities and also looked into detail of the Special Economic Zone or SEZ. At the end of this lecture, we should be able to answer the following questions. What is SEZ? What is the history of free trade zones? What are the fundamentals of SEZ? What are the salient features of SEZ? That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.